David, you've been an important player in the business community of travel retail for many years now. After all this time, have you actually worked out who owns the customer yet?
Well, that's a good question, Peter. The customer is really most important. As a retailer, who is your customer? Is it the consumer, or actually is it your airport landlord that you're servicing? And that's a bit of a dilemma, I think, at times. But ultimately, the whole airport environment is about focusing on the customer. And the real challenge with airports, as we've heard in some of the presentations, is that there are so many stakeholders in airports. Over 200, I think it was, that someone said about at Changi. So who actually is joining all of that activity together? And I think the concept that really, rather than saying who owns the customer, I think it's who's owning the customer's time is the principle I really want to get to. Because airports are about time management. It's a very finite amount of time that's available, and using that time wisely is really about generating commercial revenues. So if customers are trapped in check-in, in security lines, immigration controls, all the time they're doing those things, they are non-value adding activities to the commercial revenue. So really making sure that the map from the start of the customer journey to the moment they actually get on board the aircraft, that managing that whole process is critical to commercial revenue success. Because you can have the best retail, the best food and beverage, the best everything, but actually if the customer is running through the terminal, putting his belt on and desperately trying to get onto the aeroplane, there are no commercial revenues to be had.
So have you actually factored what the cost of lost dwell time is?
Yes, quite a lot of studies have been done on that. And I think it's generally accepted that for every minute that people are actually spending in a queue, it's about 1% from the revenue base, which is a pretty staggering sum. And I think if you consider that airport business models are about pennies millions of times, it's really, really important to get that activity right.
It's all about processing. It's all about time lost at check-in and at security. And we know there are very good reasons why these things take time. But the fact is that if you compare Europe with what exists, for example, here in Singapore or in Hong Kong, the difference, it's day and night, the difference in terms of the speed and quality of processing, and therefore leaving passengers, at least here, a realistic opportunity to spend and enjoy their time airside, rather than coming, as you do in Europe, in many cases, frustrated, upset, and completely disinclined to spend any money.
I think foot and chute comes to mind when you have people standing in lines and then there are actually security lanes that aren't manned, and the checking to get through, or the line to get through a security is just too long. So it's just fundamental. And I think the airlines probably know the most about the customers because they have all the customers' details. They know where they live, they know how often they're travelling, often they're infrequent flyer. And I suspect that often the big cause of complaint to either airports or airlines is about the delays in actually getting processed and making people's life pretty miserable.
Let's just go back to retail airports. That of course includes food and beverage. Do you actually think that passengers, travellers are getting a fair deal at airports nowadays?
A fair deal is definition of a fair deal, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of debate around street pricing versus is it really tax-free? Is it really duty-free? And I think there's a very worrying trend for me that I observe is that there seems to be a real misalignment of pricing policy across the world. So in some places, actually what you're buying airside is not tax-free, and in other places it is. And I think the industry has a real responsibility to itself to actually protect the airport channel and say, when you shop in an airport, it is genuinely good value. Because I think one of the key things that airports do is they have the reputation for having genuine product. It isn't counterfeit. When somebody buys a brand, they know it's the real thing. I think people also want the confidence that the price they're paying is a fair price. And if it says it's tax-free, then it should be tax-free.
I guess the perception above all else, and I had a working example of it last week. I bought a new iPad 2 from Carphone Warehouse in London, got onto an airport, and the price at the airport was exactly the same price as the high street. That's patently not right, isn't it?
It's absolutely not right, because it undermines the complete offer. there. And I really do think that, and only landlords, only airports can control this, and they can control that through their contracting. I don't think it's trying to govern margins. It's really about making sure that the proposition to the consumer, people are confident in. And if it says tax-free, then I think it needs to be tax-free.
So how then do you think food and beverage can actually be improved at airports? I mean, we do see at many airports a real development in terms of the overall product offer. You've got the main franchises, but you've also got some specialist brands and even some local brands. But in most cases, in many cases, it's just a bit of a cookie cutter approach.
Well, that can tend to happen. I think, in my opinion, it's incumbent upon the airport to be a good client and being quite focused on the needs of the customer and sponsoring concessionaires to change or even just develop specific food and beverage offers for that particular airport.
What then do you think are the pivotal commercial pillars for airports to generally maximise their commercial revenues?
First of all, understanding who your customer are. It's just essential. For me, it's just basic common sense and the basic builder. You've got to understand who your customers are there, and they will vary potentially by day of the week, by time of the day, and whether they're business or leisure, or they're local travellers and domestic. But it's really important to understand who they are, and then start working out and talking to them what the sort of needs, what fulfills their needs.
Stay close to them.
Stay close to them. You've got to be close. Domestic retailers, the retailers we look at in the high street there, that's exactly what they do. It doesn't happen by chance. It's thought about, and a lot of money is done on research and development of new content. Why would you not do that at an airport? Why would you not bring those practices to bear?
Just moving on, do you think that they're using airports, airlines too, are using social media in the way that they perhaps should be nowadays? Do they need to be fleeter of foot in terms of connecting with their passengers using this media?
Oh, most definitely. I think it's incumbent upon everybody to really embrace the technology and make sure that everybody works together to ensure we get the most commercial revenues out of that.
These are interesting times ahead.
Well, I think I used the word that was used in one of the presentations the other day, criminal, if you don't maximise the revenue opportunity that exists. Now, those opportunities are going to change, they're going to develop, and you've got to do different things to capture them. But people, we are in the habit of spending once we get airside, and it's just making sure that the offer and the spending is offer-led, not demand-led. That if you entice people with something that's really innovative and exciting, it's good. I think for me, there's a position missing now in the airport world, and that's manager or director, preferably director of customer time management, because if we can focus on the customer's time, the passenger's time, and ensure that we maximise the dwell time airside. I think I was looking at some research the other day that said actually dwell time in Asia is about twice that of Europe and America. And I suspect that's primarily because of the long-haul nature of the business and so forth. But that gives the market in Asia a competitive advantage in terms of building spend. But the reality is that I think from all the work that I've seen is once you go past about 90 minutes of dwell time, the value of that diminishes. So the trick is to make sure the early dwell time is used to best effect, and whether that's for retail or for food and beverage, is ensure that whatever dollar is available to be spent, is make sure it's spent.
David King, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Pete.